to throw for it. Heaving downfield for Logan on the left side. He caught the football on a diving catch at the 10-yard line. Freddie Logan.
Tony is back to throw. A screen is being set up. He overthrows it. Intercepted. Intercepted 30, 20, 15, 10, down at the 5. James Irving intercepted. He read that perfectly. And boy, the Terriers are not.
What?
They got it. They got it.
And number one is going to take it in for the score. Jeff Vickery. My. What a turnaround here. College football, the sport is distinctly American. The tradition is a part of us all. Imagine the countless hours we've spent watching our Saturday heroes perform. Ever since a November afternoon in 1889, the Wofford Terriers have played this American game. Their performances have thrilled us and made us proud, and their contributions have continued even after their football careers have ended. Coaches, educators, doctors, lawyers, business leaders. That's what the hundreds of men who have played the game for Wofford College have become. And this is their story of legends in gold and black. In its early years, football did not enjoy complete acceptance on college campuses. In the 1890s and early 1900s, football was here one year and gone the next. It was officially abolished at Wofford from 1902 to 1913. In 1914, football was welcomed back and has remained a part of campus life ever since. One of the very best of the pre-World War II teams was the 1928 squad, with a record of 7 wins, 2 losses, and 1 tie. The team's best player was running back Claude Finney. Oddly enough, Finney had never played organized football until his junior year at Wofford. Head coach Tommy Scaife spotted him in an intramural game and liked the way the youngster ran. Finney led the state of South Carolina in scoring during his senior year of 1928. And in 1961, Dr. Claude Finney was inducted into the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame. It was the early 40s. Europe was embroiled in war, and America's involvement was soon to come. At Wofford, Aubrey Faust was an end on the football team, and he was a true All-American boy. Handsome at 6'4", 185 pounds, president of the student body, and a letterman in 4 sports. Faust played on teams of average ability, but he was a standout and the captain of the team in 1942. The same year, he was selected as Wofford's first All-American football player. After graduation, Aubrey Faust joined the American effort in World War II. A year later, leading a patrol in Normandy, he was killed in action. Aubrey Faust was only 23 years old. Until World War II, Wofford football teams had been through more losing seasons than winning ones. There was no financial aid for athletes, so Wofford students played for the fun of the game. One proud moment occurred in 1933 when the Terriers upset Clemson 14-13. It was one of only 3 wins that season, and it must have had a shocking impact, for it was that very same year that Clemson created its highly successful IPTE Club to raise money for athletic scholarships. Immediately after the war, Wofford decided to raise money for its own scholarships, and the Wofford 11 Club was born. Donors contributed $11, $1 for each of the 11 starting players. The 11 Club eventually became the Terrier Club, which today is one of the nation's most successful fundraising organizations. In 1947, Wofford football was ready to embark upon a new course. The man hired to turn the program around was 33-year-old William Philip Dickens, the new head coach. Phil Dickens had been a winner all his life. As a high school player in the early 30s when he scored 96 points in a single game, and as an all-Southeastern Conference tailback at the University of Tennessee. Wofford had not fielded a winning team in the previous 15 seasons, But now with scholarships available and a young, aggressive head coach, Wofford's football image was about to change. Dickens had been hired in February of 1947, too late to organize a spring practice for his team. He was granted permission to hold special summer practices, 4 grueling weeks under a hot July sun. Jimmy Gordon was an incoming freshman that summer.
It was hell, I tell you. And the one thing I remember about that summer practice, and I think everybody would say this, that was a Burma Road. We had an exercise after, a drill after practice every day. And they would stagger everybody around a big circle, and I'm talking about close to 100 people. And they would hold the dummies, and if you didn't have dummies, they'd stand there. And you'd have to throw reverse body blocks alternately all the way around that circle. And boy, they'd pick you up and throw you to the next one, and you'd been exhausted from the practice all day. And that was the toughest thing to me that I remember, any drill out there. Of course, the summer practice was fortunate for me because it gave me a chance to get a jump and be able to play as a freshman. And that was true because they started 5 freshmen that first year. 5 of those guys were freshmen. So you could tell that that was the beginning of something that was going to be good.
Dickens brought with him the Tennessee version of the single wing offense. It had 2 features which set it apart from other single wings of the day. A balanced line in which both guards often pulled to block, and a blocking back who stood side saddle to the line of scrimmage. Every snap of the ball was expected to be at a precise speed and location. Dickens hired assistant coaches who later made names for themselves. Jim Myers, a member of the first staff, became the head coach at Texas A&M and then assistant head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. Clay Stapleton, who replaced Myers, later became the head coach at Iowa State. The following year, Lou McCullough joined the staff. He eventually became the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. Wilbur Stevens wound up with Dickens at Indiana University as the offensive backfield coach. And athletic trainer Warren Ariel had a distinguished career with 3 major universities and 2 National Football League teams. All 6 of Dickens' teams at Wofford had winning records. His second season in 1948 produced Wofford's first undefeated team. And this undefeated season was most unusual. The Terriers tied their first 5 games and then won the last 4 for a record of 4 wins, no losses, and 5 ties. The 1948 season was significant in Wofford's football history. After years of only moderate success, the Terriers had become winners. The fans were excited about Wofford football, but the best was yet to come. It was 1949. For 3 years, Dickens had recruited far and wide, and he had built a powerful team. On it were numerous World War II veterans and some outstanding players from Dickens' home state of Tennessee. Wofford football was about to become known nationwide. The 49 team roared through its schedule unbeaten. It outscored the opposition by an average of 25 points a game. 5 opponents were shut out, and 3 others held to a single touchdown. After winning all 11 games, the Terriers played Florida State in the Cigar Bowl in Tampa, Florida. Although Wofford's winning streak was brought to an end, 4 Terriers were named to the 11-man All-State team. Center Harvey Moyer, guard Vernon Quick, tackle Elby Hammett, and tailback Sammy Sewell. Wofford's driving force on the field in the late 40s was a tough, shifty runner and thrower. His name was Sammy Sewell. Slingin' Sammy, they called him. Sewell had grown up in Spartanburg. A 150-pounder, he came to Wofford to play tailback in the single wing. Coach Phil Dickens said he won games for us when the going was tough, and he felt there was nothing he couldn't do. These words were never more true than on Thanksgiving Day, 1947, against a favored Erskine team. Sewell fractured his collarbone in the first quarter but stayed in the game, running and passing for all 4 Wofford touchdowns in a 26-20 victory. It gave Wofford its first winning season in 19 years. During the next 2 seasons, Sewell was an honorable mention All-American, running and throwing for 38 career touchdowns. Sammy Sewell and his teammates tasted defeat 8 times his freshman year, but as a senior in 1949, Sewell helped take the Terriers all the way to the top with an undefeated season. On September 22, 1950, the Terriers traveled to Montgomery, Alabama, a 5-touchdown underdog to the Auburn Tigers. But there were many star players returning from the undefeated 49 squad, and this Wofford team had grown accustomed to winning. 23 straight regular season games without a loss. The Terriers were trailing Auburn after 3 quarters. Early in the 4th, Wofford got a break, recovering a fumble at the Auburn 19. Then Dennis Barber caught this pass at the 2. Sophomore Bobby McClellan then scored the winning touchdown, and Wofford had earned a 1914 victory, its greatest football victory ever. A year later, Wofford was on the verge of repeating the upset. Tailback Jack Beeler hit 24 of 32 pass attempts. But the Terriers lost the game 30-14. Beeler's performance, however, helped earn him an invitation to the Blue-Gray All-Star game 2 months later. Coach Phil Dickens was a tough field leader and a disciplinarian, but he was fair. He brought out the very best in his players, and they idolized him. As a tribute, his former players established a football scholarship at Wofford in Phil Dickens' name just before his death in 1983. Bob Pravat, the blocking back in Phil Dickens' single-wing offense, remembers his coach.
Well, I recall one night that we played Carson Newman, had beat him 14-0. Kept the ball the whole night, but could not score. Go up and down the field, and we'd either get a penalty or fumble the ball or something would happen. When the game got over, or, you know, we'd won 14-0, and we were in the dressing room celebrating a little bit. Coach Dickens was not satisfied. He came in and slammed that door, and it came off the hinges. And he said, "You boys wait till Monday. I'll see you fellows Monday." And he did. He saw us Monday, and practice was a little harder than it usually was. And as usual, we played a much better game the following Saturday.
Dickens left Wofford in 1953 to become head coach at Wyoming. His successor was Conley Snidow, a veteran of the coaching profession who came to Spartanburg from Emory and Henry College in Virginia. With him, Snidow brought an innovative new offense to replace the single wing. It was called the T formation, and the modern passing game was born. Under Coach Snidow, Wofford football continued to prosper. Beginning with Dickens' first season in 1947 and continuing through 1957, the Terriers had winning records for 11 consecutive years. And at one point during the mid-50s, the Terriers won 9 straight games against Southern Conference opponents. The year 1956 brought together the most famous passing duo in Wofford's history. A lanky pass receiver from Fayetteville, North Carolina by the name of Jerry Richardson, and a quarterback from Dublin, Georgia, Charlie Bradshaw. In his 4th game as a Terrier, Richardson showcased his talent on a foggy night in Newberry. In that game, he caught 7 passes for an incredible 241 yards with plays like this. 2 weeks later, Bradshaw was the South Carolina Player of the Week, leading Wofford to a come-from-behind victory over the Citadel. Bradshaw and Richardson were selected All-State in each of their 3 seasons together. Both became All-Americans. Richardson played professionally with the Baltimore Colts. Today, they are in business together, and both are members of the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame. In 1957, the Terriers came close to winning a national championship. A victory against Lenore Ryan in the second game of the season had halted LR's 22-game unbeaten streak. And after 8 games, the Terriers were the #1 team in the NAIA. Wofford finished the season with an 8-2 record and a 7th-place national ranking. The defense was superb. Only the University of South Carolina scored more than 2 touchdowns against the Terriers. In sports history, 1961 is remembered as the year Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's home run record. But for Wofford, 1961 was the year of Bob Rocket Roma. A senior academically, Roma was in his first season as the starting halfback, and he became Wofford's first 1,000-yard rusher. In one game against Catawba, he was spectacular, scoring on runs of 48, 66, and 56 yards. And in the same game, he intercepted 2 passes. Rocket Roma finished the season as the leading rusher and leading scorer in the state of South Carolina. 2 of the premier defensive players of the 60s were guard Dan Lewis and tackle Don Williams. Both were drafted by NFL teams. Conley Snido's 14th and final season in 1966 was a success. Quarterback Warren Whitaker had his best year with 1,600 yards of total offense. And the Terriers won their final 3 games for a record of 6 wins, 3 losses, and a tie. Snido turned over the head job to his assistant coach of 14 years, Jim Brakefield. The following year, during the presidential campaign of 1968, Wofford students saw Richard Nixon when he visited Spartanburg. A few weeks later, they saw Ted Phelps, a great running back, close out his 4-year career with U Wofford's single-season and career rushing records. Jim Brakefield's 3rd season as head coach in 1969 was marked by a major decision. The Terriers would be in a new offensive set, the Y, or the wishbone as it later came to be known. Only a handful of teams across the country were using it, and as it turned out, few teams knew how to defend it.
Conley and I saw Texas play in a ball game New Year's, in a bowl game, and that's the first time we had really seen the wishbone, and they certainly ran it well, and we were impressed, so we got a film from Texas and sat down and studied this for over a month. Of course, Gene Alexander was helping us at this time. And we came up with our version of what Texas was doing with the wishbone. This is where it started. And we made some changes, like the blocking situations, like we didn't block with our tackle like they did, and some things like this, and put our people a little closer, but it really came from Texas, and we went to this. We got some pretty good kids, and at about the time we got Jordan and Chandler and this bunch of boys. And they began to come of age, so they were ready to play. And of course, they were juniors and seniors. The year we had the 2 years and won the 20 straight football games. I think these boys came of age, and they got so they knew what we were doing, and they were good athletes, and I think we were doing something well. I think we were running an offense that people had trouble defensing because we'd either give the fullback, or we'd keep it, or we'd pitch it, and they didn't know which we was going to do. And Chandler was a smart enough kid; we could keep it so they didn't know what we were going to do. Of course, I think this is what made the offense go.
The season of 1969 with its new offense began with 2 losses. But in the 3rd game against Presbyterian, the wishbone was magnificent. The Terriers scored 6 touchdowns in the first half and coasted to a 42-8 victory. And it didn't stop there. They won 9 straight games, the best Wofford season in 2 decades. The winning streak continued through 1970, 20 straight victories. During the streak, the Terriers scored an amazing 39 points per game. The defense intercepted 28 passes in 1969, still a school record. When the 1970 regular season ended, the Terriers were the #1 team in the NAIA. During the 1969 and 70 seasons, linebacker Sid Allred, middle guard Ronnie Wilson, and center Sterling Allen were named All-Americans. Halfback Bobby Jordan broke all of Wofford's scoring records. Fullback Clifford Boyd came within 81 yards of Ted Phelps' career rushing record. Harold Chandler, the quarterback, established new passing and total offense records. Skip Horn set new receiving records. And Randy Bringman, with his black high-top shoes, became Wofford's most prolific kick scorer. Breakfield went on to become the head coach at Appalachian State. One of Breakfield's assistant coaches was Fisher DeBerry, who became head coach at the Air Force Academy in 1984. College football evolved into an explosive offensive game in the 70s. Who can forget the Wofford-Newberry game of 1973? I was there doing the radio play-by-play, and here is how we summed up the story that October evening in 1973.
Corner Fussell at Snyder Field on the campus of Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, where we have just seen a game that people will probably be talking about for years. The final score, Wofford 41, Newberry 41. Newberry scored the final 28 points in the ball game as they were trailing 41-13 and trailing 34-7. Way back a long time ago in that first half. 41-41, the final score, 82 points scored. And some of you are probably recalling when Wofford played in a game where there were that many points scored. Well, you've got to go a long ways back to 1949. And that was one of the super Wofford teams. Some of you may recall they won 11 and lost none in the regular season. And then they lost to Florida State in the Cigar Bowl by a score of 19-6. And that year, they defeated High Point by a score of 83-13. Ironically, the week before they shut out Newberry, 40-0. So they scored 96 points. There were 96 points scored in that game in 1949. And you've got to go better than 2 decades before you get up to 1973 and a ball game that was tied by Newberry, 41-41.
In the early 70s, tailback Ricky Satterfield and his teammate, quarterback Carter Davis, set rushing and passing records which were still standing in the 80s. Offensive guard Coy Gibson, an All-American in 1973 and 74, helped pave Satterfield's path to the goal line. The 70s were explosive, and the great 1969 and 70 teams called our attention to it. But it was 1972 which proved that any offense can strike quickly. Coach Jack Peterson's Terriers aligned 3 running backs in an I formation behind the quarterback, a full house I. The team had a modest record of 6 wins and 4 losses, and its scoring average of 3 touchdowns a game was not extraordinary. But when Wofford did score, the fans were entertained. The team ran and passed, blocked kicks, and intercepted passes for one long play after another. 11 touchdown plays of 50 yards or longer. 2 years later, in 1974, with Carter Davis still at quarterback, the Terriers set a modern-day school record with 632 total yards in a single game against Davidson. But the 70s weren't all offense. One of the best players performed on defense, Tom Bauer. Bauer was a symbol of what the Wofford student athlete was all about. An all-state end in 1972 and 73 who graduated Phi Beta Kappa and later earned a degree from law school. One of the greatest moments of the 70s was provided by the defense. The year was 1977. Wofford and Furman, a very special rivalry and one as old as college football itself. On this rainy night, Furman was favored to defeat the Terriers, but Wofford was leading 13-7 with 1 minute to play. The Paladins were driving downfield, and a 4th down play from the 10 would decide the outcome.
4th down, what a play is coming up here, 156. Henderson brings them out. Goal at the 10-yard line for Furman. Henderson back to pass. Drop. Looks for the sideline. He's going to be caught by Warner at the goal line. But he's stopped. He's alone. David Agee stops him. He was hit immediately by David Agee at the goal line, and the Terriers take over at the goal line. Whoa!
In the late 70s, the wishbone offense once again became Wofford's trademark. Coach Buddy Sasser entrusted his offense to a quarterback whose name was a link to the past, Charlie Bradshaw Jr. After becoming a starter in his third game, Bradshaw directed the Terriers to 26 victories during his 4 years and had a higher winning percentage than even his famous father. The Terriers were a heralded running team during Sasser's 6th season. The 1979 team set a school rushing record. In 1980, Wofford was ranked 14th in the NAIA with a record of 7 wins, 2 losses, 2 ties. The 1981 team opened the season against eventual national champion Clemson, and the Terriers gained more rushing yardage against the Tigers than did any other team that season. The fact that Wofford led Clemson 3-0 after the first quarter prompted some people to exclaim, "You knew Clemson would have a good football team when they came from behind to defeat Wofford."
The final numbers on the scoreboard between Clemson and Wofford really aren't that important because it was a well-played game for both teams. A game in which Clemson's offense and defense showed well, and where Wofford gained a measure of respect coming into the Tigers' den and putting on a good performance for the homestanding Clemson team.
The 1982 Terriers achieved a record of 8-3 and were ranked 9th in the nation. Tim Renfro set interception and punt return records. And Don Hairston kicked the first 50-yard field goal in school history. The Terrier Club continued its record growth, reaching $220,000. During Buddy Sasser's 6 seasons, 20 of his players were named first or second team All-America or honorable mention. In 1983, Wofford celebrated its 75th season of playing football. An all-time team was selected. The Terriers wore gold jerseys for the first time in more than a decade. Bill Parker, who had been Buddy Sasser's defensive coordinator, was the new head coach, and he won his first 4 games. For the second straight year, the Terriers played a game in front of a live television audience. Through the years, Wofford has never backed away from playing against larger and better-funded football teams. And in their own league, the Terriers have been amazingly successful. In the early 80s, Wofford won 22 out of 24 games against NAIA teams. Wofford College is one of the nation's highly respected football powers, and the intercollegiate football program exists in harmony with Wofford's high academic ideals. As the Terriers build on their grand tradition, the years ahead hold the promise of more victories and more excitement. And the Wofford Terriers you watch perform tomorrow are future legends in gold and black.